have a seat, and we're going to get started. Apologies for starting a little bit late. So, hello everybody. My name is Andres. I'm the current president of the Stanford Transhumanist Association, and I hope you enjoy this debate. So, Edward Osborne Wilson once said that the real problem with humanity is the following. We have paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. There is no denying that there are massive problems within and caused by technological civilization. How does the average mental health of people at university campuses compare to those of people in primitive societies? Consider eating disorders, percentage of people on antidepressants or anti-anxiety agents, drug abuse, marital problems. The number of people living alone has increased. Social media addiction, etc. Listing them all would be an endless task. The question is, how do we address this meaningfully? How do we stop using new technology as simple band-aids for the problems caused by technology itself? Tonight, we are lucky enough to see two very bright individuals who embody opposite ideals approach these problems. Zoltan Istvan is a futurist and a journalist for the Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and other notable magazines. And he's a best-selling author who writes about politics, atheism, and transhumanism. He strongly defends the view that technology has the potential to fundamentally transform human experience and existence in positive ways, such as the elimination of involuntary aging and disease. His latest endeavor has been a leading political campaign to run for the US presidency in 2016 on the platform of the Transhumanist Party. Our second debater is Zoltan Vs Zerzan. John is a philosopher who advocates anarcho-primitivism, arguing that agricultural civilization is inherently oppressive, and advocating that we draw upon the ways of life of hunter-gatherers as an inspiration for what a free society would look like. He argues that we need to abandon our pursuits of technology and return to the positive principles found in primitive societies if we are ever to be satisfied and live in harmony. It is important to mention that our dear speakers tonight represent specific views within their own field of inquiry. Zoltan's focus on life extension is something a lot of transhumanists care about. It is worth mentioning the existence of other focus of interest. Namely, other strands include abolitionism, which focuses on relieving the suffering throughout the living world, and singularitarianism, which focuses on the potential dangers of artificial intelligence, and therefore on how to program a friendly superintelligence. Likewise, for anarcho-primitivism, there are multiple schools of thought. We believe, though, that the conversation between these two authors is a great way to start the dialogue. Now, it is obvious that we are not the Stanford Primitivist Association, so you might infer that there is a slight bias in the way we see how the solution will play out. However, we want to make clear that the intention of this event is to have a thorough and fair exploration of the valid ideas that very bright people might disagree on. We want to open the doors of thought and start a meaningful conversation between the two ideals. We have to be open to alternative points of view, no matter who one is. At the end of it, we don't want you to take from this event transhumanist one or primitivist one, but rather, I open my mind to new views, and I might consider them deeply. The debate will have 3 rounds and will last over 1 hour. For the first round, the speakers will make their opening remarks for 10 minutes. The second round will consist of 10 minutes rebuttals, and the speakers will have 5 minutes for closing remarks in the third round. While we want you all to play an active role in the discussion, we kindly ask you to hold your questions until the end of the third round for the audience Q&A. After the Q&A, the association will make some closing remarks. Then we invite you all to stick around to meet the speakers and chat with one another. Thank you all for coming, and please join us in welcoming Zoltan to kick off the debate.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and especially thank you to Mr. Zerzan for making the flight all the way from Oregon here. It's obviously a challenge to put all these things together, so I also want to just thank the Stanford Transhumanist Association. We've been working on this for a number of months, and it's nice to see it finally come together. And of course, thank you to everyone who is here today to listen and ask questions and hopefully learn. So this has been a really interesting week for me. This is one of the very first formal debates that I have been in, and I have been familiar with John Zerzan's writings for well over a decade now. When I was in college, I had my own foray into a lot of eco kind of movements, and I had also worked for a number of years for the National Geographic Channel. And most of my stories, well, at least half those stories were about environmentalism, wildlife, mining, overpopulation, the kind of issues that are core to the anarcho-primitivist type of mindset. Along the way, I have become a very strong-minded transhumanist, but we'll get into that later. In the beginning, I want to ask you first to just imagine what a world would look like if we actually gave up some of the technologies that we have, if we gave up progress, if we essentially gave up civilization. If we somehow could happen, a miracle, how would it be? Well, many of us would probably wake up in a field, in a cave. We'd probably be sleeping on animal skins. We would probably have a fire that went out, if we could even make a fire. That can be considered a technology to some people. We'd probably have sores all over our bodies. We probably wouldn't have taken a bath for a long time. There might not be any hot water. Certainly wouldn't be any clean towels or soap or shampoo or anything like that. Ultimately, though, the world would be something that is incredibly difficult, at least for all of us in the modern world today. To go into that world would press us to new experiences that most of us have not had. Most of us have almost zero sense of survival skills. However, John Zerzan and a lot of anarcho-primitivists are asking us to do that, asking us to give up the modern world that we have evolved through, that we have adapted to, that we have created over the last 10,000 years, and especially over the last 400 or 500 years, where technology and science and medicine has dramatically changed the lives of all of us. It's changed the lives of all of our loved ones. It's changed the lives of the pets we have. It's changed the lives of virtually every person on the planet. I recently did an article and came across a Business Insider piece. And one of the great things about the piece was it highlighted some of the benefits that the world is going through. And most of these benefits are because of globalization, because of technology, and because of science. Some of the benefits are that people are living longer than they've ever lived before. Lifespans are just simply going through the roof.
For the rich people.
No, it's for the poor people. It's definitely for everyone. I mean, mortality rates are down significantly all across the board. There are less war deaths all across the board as well. And there are less people hungry than have ever been per average on the face of the earth. These are the kinds of benefits that technology and science and globalization have brought to the planet. And there will be people that will argue, but you really can't argue against statistics. Lifespans have simply gone through the roof, and it's perhaps the biggest single factor in determining why and how people are living better. The biggest problem with anarcho-primitivism to a transhumanist is ultimately the idea that they want to remain in a very human state, a kind of hunter and gatherer type of state. The problem with that for transhumanists is ultimately that transhumanists are not concerned, or they just don't have any more connection with being a human being anymore. Most transhumanists like myself, we want to live indefinitely, we want to take pills, we want to put microchips in our heads, and we will replace our arm whenever we can with a robotic arm. These are the things that transhumanists are aspiring for. It sounds pretty weird and freaky to a lot of people. However, the future's already here. There are already thousands of people that have microchips inside their head, Alzheimer's patients. There are, you know, if you're going to keep laughing, I'm going to throw you out. Got it? Let's get this guy out of here if he's going to continue to interrupt right now.
I'm sorry to offend you.
That's all right, man, but just stop it. Because we got an hour here going, and that's the way this is.
Calm down. All right.
Okay?
Let's continue. Just please don't continue to make it a problem. Don't control things. Emotion. For sure. Let us continue.
Sorry about that, but John and I had a conversation ahead of time. We're trying to make sure that this is something meaningful for all of us and not have hecklers interrupt. The bottom line, though, is when you look at some of the factors, some of the statistics that are involved with how the human race has evolved, how many logistical things are taking place, people living in skyscrapers, flushing toilets, the elimination of some major diseases around the world, humanity is getting better. I consider that transhumanity because all these technologies, all these medicines are coming from our innovation as a species. It's coming from a place of scientists, engineers, doctors, all types of people and all types of professions working to make it so that you, every single one of you out there, can live longer, can live better, and can live healthier. And it's not been an easy road. I mean, it takes decades sometimes to get medicines through the pipeline that actually will benefit the species. It took 20, 30 years of developing exoskeleton technology so that we could get people, as they are today, out of wheelchairs. Unfortunately, these are some of the technologies that anarcho-primitivists are trying to take away. Not take away, but they are suggesting that we go back to a place when those technologies don't exist like that. Because they say that being a hunter-gatherer is something that is ultimately better for our spirit, better for our happiness, and something that's going to make us happier. I'm not even going to argue that right now, perhaps in the next, after we hear John. But what I am saying is that there's no question that technology and science has made it so that we can all live significantly better, be in a room, shoot off our tweets to our friends, be on the internet, learn things, travel to wherever we want to go, whether it's going to a ski trip to the Alps or whether it's going surfing in the Bahamas. These are all things that have come from the modern world. And we should be very thankful that they have come because they have come at the expense of a lot of people through many, many years developing these things so that we could all move forward and live a significantly better life.
Yeah, I can't help but sneak something to the front of the line as far as what Zoltan was just saying. The wonder is, this is always the bottom line thing with the technophiles: health, longevity, and so forth, and all the wonders of technology. This is a new full-page ad from Microsoft Cloud. The cloud that is helping cure cancer, right? Good idea. Except this is part of the usual shell game. The technology which creates the cancer, technology in the widest sense, not just the high-tech part of it, but the whole of it, then comes around to offer the cure, offer to do the healing, to fix what it's caused in the first place. Kind of amazing when you think about it. Except it's, so what it's giving, well, anyway, I think the point is obvious. We might get back to that because there's a lot more on that very topic. Well, I want to say, without mincing words, I consider transhumanist an unhealthy fantasy. And I think also, more importantly, perhaps, than my opinion about that is what it has to do with, what it really partakes of. And I think one real helpful way to look at it is in terms of domestication. And Zoltan mentioned that in passing. 10,000 years ago in various parts of this planet. Domestication of animals and plants and ourselves in the bargain imposed itself. And then, and if we jump forward, we look at artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, GMOs, the whole realm of stuff. And I always go back to a line from the late Paul Shepard. He said, it's all there in the first step. And what he meant was, it's implicit. When we make the shift to domestication, everything shifts, everything changes. That's an epical, if not sort of a cosmic change. And so what he meant was there's an inner logic that commences. And it's somewhat mysterious, but it isn't just a matter of contingency or coincidence, that it keeps feeding on itself and becomes more of a far-flung control apparatus and control domination of nature at an ever deeper level. This is what that's all about. So I think that's kind of a pithy way to put it. And yeah, mainly I'm just trying to, I guess, derail some of the transhumanist stuff, but to stick in a little bit of the primitivist part. Before domestication, and right after that, of course, the first civilizations, relatively quickly, it is the operative thing that introduces civilization, and the road of technology, its realm, its reign. And before, some of this is always frustrating. Maybe we'll work through that through further dialogue. There's just the beginning, I think, of, and this is one way to put it, transhumanism versus anarcho-primitivism. But it isn't just two fringe things, by the way. I really don't think it is. Because transhumanism is really the leading edge of the whole ensemble, the whole juggernaut, if you will. And of course, well, maybe not of course to you, but the primitivist thing is its cancellation, its refusal, its denial of that whole, quote, progress. Before that, and I did an interview just fairly recently with IO9, and maybe some of you are probably more familiar with it than I am, very science and tech-oriented online zine. And I thought it was a pretty good exchange, kind of brief interview, pretty lucid, I thought, pretty good questions. And the interviewer took pains at the end of the interview to put in a statement saying this guy is all wet, totally false, always had hierarchy, always had social stratification, absolute baloney to say otherwise. Well, it isn't, in fact. Anthropology 1 tells you that. This is indisputable. It's the orthodox stuff. It simply is. Maybe that person was either unaware of it or aware of it and not liking the implications, because I'll tell you, that's where it had a huge impact on the way I was looking at things when I discovered that in the 80s. Wow, I had no idea. There was a pretty good setup. Didn't destroy the natural world, didn't objectify women, didn't have armies and temples and war, didn't have everybody working their ass off like we have now. And I'm not saying it was perfect Eden. It wasn't, of course not. There's a lot of variations according to time and place, but that's before domestication. That's before the ethos of control, in effect, blotted out the ethos of sharing and egalitarianism. And that's not something, it probably sounds like something made up by anarchists wearing rose-colored glasses or rose-colored rear-view mirror or something, but it's not. It's kind of startling. Again, I think it is. Anyway, so we look, philosophers like to say, and I'm not a philosopher, I played one on TV once, but no. Because I don't think thinking at its most general gets you very far. It's a tricky game. It's not my game. What does it mean? This wonderful path of progress. Well, it's meant ruin. It's really becoming a nightmare. And I'm not going to tick off the whole physical, the eco-catastrophe that's already here, already in place. The acidifying oceans, the rising sea levels and severe weather, the melting of the polar caps and the glaciers, and on and on and on. We know that. And we also know when you get rid of, this is a long, slow process. Now we're in the phase of civilization called mass society, right? Or technological society. And what do we have here? We got the destruction of outer nature, physical nature, also got the destruction of social nature. And it's really something because now we have these mass shootings. And last month, by the way, there was an FBI report saying, yeah, they're getting more frequent. I'm talking about school shootings, but they're not just confined to school shootings. I don't know about you, but to me that's just staggering. And it's staggering that there hasn't been one intelligent thing said about that. And I think it's because it touches on the radical basis, or the non-basis, the absence of community. When you no longer have community, then anything goes. People are unmoored. There's no communal ties or social solidarity. And the quiet guy next door, or the honor student, might come out with an automatic weapon and kill the first 20 people he sees, right? This is going on all the time now. And it doesn't do any good to say the wonders of technology. Technology has erased so much. And just to get back for a second about health, we have more chronically sick people than ever. Once people were robust, and they walked on this planet knowing how to deal with things. Now, we're completely in the thrall of experts for everything. And not just technicians, but every other part of it. You got a problem, you got to call the cops. Or some other authority. That didn't used to be that way. People were accountable and responsible. And we've lost all that. I don't know about waking up covered with sores. I never heard that one. But you know, and we have some stereotypes, I'm sure, on both sides. But some of these are really not backed up by things. And you know, getting back to the IO9 thing, just for the second, and I'm done here, I guess. The person who stated that, you know, it's one thing not to know stuff about a given field. There's plenty of fields I don't know anything about, but I wouldn't demand that this is the truth and that guy is full of shit. You know, if you don't know anything, don't say that. And hundreds of people chimed in. Hundreds of technophiles chimed in. That's right. That is just utter crap. It's completely wrong. And I'm thinking, oh, really? You know? So where do you get that? But anyway, I'll leave it for that, and we can go on.
So I want to begin with a story. I've actually had perhaps the luckiest thing in my life, or one of them certainly, was the chance to actually explore a truly untouched primitive tribe in the nation of Vanuatu, which is in the South Pacific, pretty close to Fiji. I was sailing there in 1995 as part of a very extensive trip, 7-8 years sailing around the world, and I had the luck to get off my boat on one of these islands, and I went to shore and was just chatting with some of the locals, and one of the locals said, hey, there's this tribe. I said I was always interested in, I was doing photography at the time, and they said, well, there's this tribe that, you know, lives completely traditionally. And so I went there, and it ended up being truly a untouched tribe. I was the very first foreigner to visit this tribe of about 150 people called the tribe Markai. And 6 years later, I returned for the National Geographic Channel and filmed that tribe, which then went on TV. So I've been there twice, and one of the most important things about this visit is the idea of, A, how much death and sorrow and suffering I saw. This is a tribe like any other, where living very primitive. There's no technology. The women were topless. The men and the women wore different types of plants to cover their private things. So really, the huts were made from tree stuff that was tied around the pieces of wood. There's no sawing. There's no nails. No money. No religion. It's purely animistic. The problem was that almost half the people born there do not live to their adult life till around 17 or 18. And the other problem is that the mortality rate of just the infants surviving the very first year was somewhere around 35%. In America, we're far less than 1%. In most modern countries, we are also far less than 1%. But I want to touch on a little bit of what John said about sharing. Because in these communities, it's true, they do share, and they share in ways that we don't share. They are more intimate, their friendships and bonds are potentially stronger, and I agree with many of those things. If that is something that anarcho-primitivism is supporting, well, they are stronger in that area. What they didn't have in that village was because they didn't share in terms that we share by the internet, globally, through literature, through television, through the internet. They don't have the development or the evolution of technologies, medicines, science, and the things like that that could stop some of the sorrow, some of the deaths, and raise the mortality rate, and some of these other things that they ultimately are facing, that ultimately cause them to have the kind of experience that they go through on a nonstop basis. When I was there, both times when I was there, the chief and one of his wives was in constant state of mourning. I had never actually been there in the 2.5 months I think I stayed, that any of some of the main people in that village were not in a state of mourning. Their mourning usually lasts a couple seasons, or at least one season through the yam harvest. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of anarcho-primitivists don't actually consider is, while life might be happier, while life might be more natural, more harmonious with nature, what they're forgetting is that the human being has been suffering at the hands of nature for a very long time. In fact, I'm a believer that the human being is in complete conflict with nature, that making harmony with the earth is impossible. In fact, we are just part of the food chain when you consider what nature really is. And in many ways, that's exactly what was happening to this village in village of Marakai in Vanuatu. And for some of you that want to see more about that village, I've written extensively about it for National Geographic. You can just find it online. This takes me to this topic of environmentalism and what it is, the nature of being a human being. Why is it that we are so concerned with the environment, or why is it that we are so concerned with our lives, or why is it that we're so concerned with progress? It's something very structured deep down in our biological being. We simply, at the very core of our essence, are entities that want to survive. And not just survive, we're entities that want to thrive. A lot of the tenets of anarcho-primitivism go against some of that basic core idea, which is thriving and surviving. We simply want to become the most that we can be. That's why we have 15,000 jet airplanes above us or around the planet right now in the sky. That's why we have vaccines, dozens of them. That's why we are talking through a microphone, and John was able to fly here on an airplane as well. We are a species that wants to evolve and ascend and essentially conquer nature. That has been the core of the human experience for many, many thousands of years now. And I can assure you that even if some transhumanists don't agree with me, and there are plenty that don't, conquering nature is one of the most transhumanist things that you can actually do. We are ultimately after controlling our environment, controlling our health, controlling our well-being, controlling the length of our lifespans, and controlling even things like death coming. Now, John brings up things like school shootings, and I've watched in some of his videos, he's done this a lot of times. This appeals in a very heartfelt way. When we think about school shootings, not one of us is happy about it. We all get kind of bummed, and it is certainly on the rise. There's no question about it. But it still is an anomaly that is not in any way, well, it's so insignificant, the amount of deaths that are occurring from school shootings, that to use it as anything other than a kind of an approach to try to win people's minds over is frankly wrong. And I consider that unethical to speak too much about it, because ultimately, well, school shootings get made by the media, and the media operates off one single purpose, at least any kind of capitalistic media. They operate off selling Coca-Cola commercials and Lexus commercials and stuff like that. And they will make a field day out of these school shootings. They will make a field day off whatever the celebrity actresses are and stuff like that. But the reality is We have had problems throughout history with rogue individuals doing things. That's the nature of biological beings. Probably 10% of us are pretty fringe as it is. Probably 1 or 2% of us are crazy. Such is the nature, and those crazy people often do things like when they have access to guns and go shoot people. But it's really not a good example of saying that technology is driving kids all across the world to start shooting their schoolmates. It's just too random and too much of an anomaly. Ultimately, the only real way to gauge human progress, human might, human development, human evolution, is to ask yourself, are you further along this process of life than you would have been had none of this technology or medicine been here? Is it something that you actually want to return to? Is it something that, given a big button right now, or a simple choice, maybe a magic wand, would any of us go back to it for this idea just so that we could potentially be happier? Happier in which way? Living to age 38 and dying? There were plenty of diseases back there. Maybe cancer has become more dominant now. But ultimately, it's always going to be something out there. And the transhumanist goal of this is to conquer whatever it is out there. The transhumanist goal is to take the problems, the diseases, the hang-ups that the human species have, and to work through them with technology and science and medicine, and ultimately to make our lives much better, so that every day you can wake up and not worry about being eaten, not worry about clothing, not worry about shelter, not worry about survival, but worry about thriving, worry about creativity, worry about perhaps becoming an astronaut and going to a new solar system or something like that. These are the things that transhumanists are interested in, and these are the things that transhumanists are working towards.
I guess I'm consider it an advantage to go second. I was hoping I could go second. So I realized that I do have an edge in that sense. The thing about the group you visited and wrote about, I think you admitted at the very top that they were not uncontacted. You were directed to them. And in groups that have chiefs, and I would put money on the fact that they had domestication, right? They raised crops?
They did raise crops.
Okay. Well, if there's a watershed concerning domestication, then that's not an example of problems that undomesticated people have, is it? I mean, that's a rough dividing line. Before and after domestication. After, you get all kinds of things. You get human sacrifice. You name it. So you can't just. A lot of people try to get away with this too, by the way, writing on these topics. Primitive society. That doesn't tell you anything. That's a very imprecise term. Were they practicing domestication or not? That's a usually extremely crucial line. And people didn't have chiefs before domestication. They lived in band society. Again, with the egalitarian ethos, that there's tons of ethnography on this, of even surviving people, and not to mention the archaeological evidence of that before. But that you could go way off into that as well. And I think in passing you said there have always been diseases, always lots of diseases, something like that. Actually, virtually every single degenerative disease and infectious disease is a disease of civilization. And maybe that seems kind of far-fetched too, but there's a whole literature on that. You can look it up, okay, if you don't believe me. And I get to jump around because you let off. The conquering nature as a trait to be admired, that's, we're kind of shooting past each other on that one. I can't even wrap my head around that, really, quite frankly. People could get to be astronauts. That's, I don't think that's something a healthy person would want, to tell you the truth. And I think of a story of a young friend of mine, a friend of ours who there was a sort of a conference with a number of workshops, and we overheard people saying this primitivist guy said it doesn't matter. He said no, I screwed up. He said the Earth is flat. These people are crazy. You know, what the hell? I mean, what he actually said was, if you lived in band society, or if you get to live in band society, it doesn't matter if the Earth is round or flat, because you're not in the business of running the world or taking a picture from the moon. You know, that lovely picture, all the enviro posters, the blue thing in the space, wonderful stuff. Consider what it takes to take that picture. The massive industrial basis for that. And the industrial basis for everything, the cloud and the, you know, everything that seems to be clean and wonderful, and let's go forward with that. Yeah, except the cost is destruction of this planet, the biosphere. That's just unmistakable. There's no, I don't know if you mentioned that, but that's a hard one to kind of shove under the rug, it seems to me. And I haven't magnified the shootings. I think it's personally, it just rips on me. And you don't have to conflate the figures because there's no answer. The answer is we've gotten so far away from community and sharing and face-to-face life that now we're getting this. And we're going to get more of this. We're going to get more pathological stuff like it. The most developed countries are showing this, like the hikikomori phenomenon in Japan, where kids take to their room for decades. 1 million people there doing that. That's pretty crazy. What kind of society? You don't want to come out of your room because the society is so empty and bereft. Or you might go out of your room and start killing people. I mean, and I never said that this is a widespread, everybody's doing it. Although it so happens that across the street from where my wife and I lived, there was a shooting. I came out from the back and I see through the drapes all these lights flashing. I thought they were coming to arrest me. Egotistically, I thought, and it was some cop saying we pushed off the block. I just wanted to tell everybody there was a student who came and shot his ex-girlfriend and her current boyfriend and himself. 2 dead. 3 casualties. And yeah, my cousin Catherine speaks to one of these other things about keeping people alive. Fatality numbers are down in the wars, right? That's because technology can keep people alive. Maybe they've lost most of their limbs and their brain. They're still breathing. That's not a fatality. Can't put it down on that. And I'm not saying they should die. Don't get me wrong. But some of this stuff is just straight up artificial. People are, quote, living. And are they? You know, that should be up to them. Anyway, I just want to mention that maybe I have a couple of minutes left. I think technology, to put it in a kind of reified way, has taken over the political ideological function, kind of a vacuum there, because so many people don't even swallow the political fix, the political ideologies, democracy, American dream. Hardly. I mean, how many people swallow that? I don't think so many. So, but what's happened, I think, is the technology has jumped into the brief, so to speak, and it makes the claims and the promises now. And you can't totally separate the two, I grant you. But, for example, technology empowers us. We hear that quite a lot in different ways. Well, why, as society gets more and more technological, do people feel more and more disempowered? Is that just a coincidence? Or the claim that technology gives us all this variety and diversity. We live in the most standardized world that has ever existed, and it's getting more standardized. There's a lot of fracas now about Common Core among the forced mass schooling industry. A lot of people don't like it, but you'd think that would be disappearing, right? All this wonderful diversity and everything. No, there's no diversity if you look at that and other things. And the biggest one probably of all, and this kind of circles back to some things we've already been talking about. Technology connects us. Well, 20 years ago, Robert Putnam wrote Bowling Alone, talking about the erosion of bowling leagues and civic associations and lodges and everything else. 20 years ago, it's even more the case, and now people have fewer friends. There's sociological studies, I can give you this stuff later if you like. Fewer friends visit friends less often, 3 times as likely to live alone as we were in the 80s. Funny thing, 80s was the beginning of the big tech thing, which keeps picking up speed, the technological innovation and its impact in everybody's life. So yeah, it's not connecting people. There's much more loneliness. Almost every day you can read an article or a study about the dire effects of loneliness. Hey, I thought we're all connected now. We're all wired together. It's a big global techno village, right? Except it ain't. That's just another lie. It's not succeeding any more than the failed political hot air. Okay, I'll leave it for that. And I don't know where we're at now.
So, to finish off this part of the debate, each of the speakers is going to give a 5-minute closing statement, and afterwards there will be a Q&A, so start thinking about questions.
So I think the one question I really want to emphasize here is, now this is a shorter kind of closing statement, is the question of what John just said actually, which is perhaps the biggest difference between transhumanism and anarcho-primitivism, is it's just a symbolic question, but why is being an astronaut cool? Because John said he doesn't think that's cool. And this is really the distinction here between John, myself, and also I think a lot of anarcho-primitivists and transhumanists, is sort of this idea of who are we, where are we going, and what do we really want to do with our life, and especially the ability of what we want to do with our life, because we have so much technological possibilities. I mean, I'm the first to say that, of course, I think being an astronaut is the coolest thing. In fact, my sail trip was on a sailboat because I couldn't build a spaceship. For a lot of people, a lot of explorers, a lot of creative types, a lot of humans that want to become more than they are, being an astronaut or being a scientist or being an explorer, being a doctor, conquering disease, conquering nature, conquering the things that plague humanity are some of the coolest and most beautiful, most meaningful experiences that humans have ever had and will likely ever have. The distinction here, though, is what is it that anarcho-primitivists want? They want to go back to a very traditional lifestyle. They don't even want chiefs, and John was right with that. There were chiefs in the Maracay village, and they were growing yams. But the idea is to even go further beyond that. Do you stop when you can't even have fire? I mean, we're talking about people walking on the moon, and 15,000 planes in the sky, and robotic arms, and microchips in people's heads. And is fire too much? This is the problem with when you try to stop progress and you try to stop technology, is ultimately you are hampering the most basic, most fundamental principle of the human being, which is we want to survive and thrive off the things that we can do with our hands, with our reasoning skills, with our abilities. Quickly, I just want to say that with school shootings, with happiness levels, with any of the other ideas or problems that anarcho-primitivists would bring up, there's a huge amount of technology coming in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years that is going to change that. It might be changes that invade on people's freedoms. Sure, having a microchip tracking you is something that could easily invade on your freedom. However, most media has already been reporting that at least 50% of us within the next 10 years will have microchips. It's a fact. It's going to happen. It's going to make things easier with payment, with living, with where you want to go. Eventually your cell phones will be in your head. It's getting a little science fiction, but people are working on it. I just did a couple articles on the brainwave technology that they have going on here, working right at Stanford and also in Silicon Valley. They already sell headsets that people can think a thought, and it will do something to you or shoot out someone. The Harvard University just did a study on this, sending a word in one's mind from India to France. In short, a lot of the problems, a lot of suffering, a lot of the dilemmas that the human race faces will be cured, will be fixed, will be overcome by the creation of technology. And it's something that is going to make us all better. I mean, after all, happiness is just something, a bunch of neurons firing. It's something that we can work out if that's really what you want. And it's something the scientists will work out. And last, I'm just going to say in my last minute that John had said that actually technology may not be empowering. But for those that want to live longer, for those that actually want to get in airplanes and travel places, for those that want to stand atop a skyscraper that they may have built, that they may have contributed to, technology is incredibly empowering. Everything about it is empowering. In fact, that's what technology really is. It's the human being gaining control over nature and making something of it that is more meaningful and significant to the species overall.
I don't think it'll even take 5 minutes. I'm kind of anxious to get into more discussion. Just so I can mention a couple of things, though. Fire, going to ban fire. Well, there's evidence that people were cooking with fire about 2 million years ago. Okay, so and all this domestication again starts 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. So there's a vast span of the human story. First Homo. Anyway, there's human capacities have been there for a long time, and yet they didn't do a lot of negative things. And that partly that mentions the one thing we haven't talked about is overpopulation. That's usually a kind of a standard thing. And it turns out that the two big institutional events that have created the unnatural population levels, the first one was domestication. And in absolute numbers, it's not huge because the numbers were so very slight, relatively speaking, at that time to begin with. But the second one was the Industrial Revolution, 200, 250 years ago, a sharp spike. And that is, of course, the basis for all of the technology, lest we forget. So when Zoltan says we want to take away the thrill of somebody standing on top of the skyscraper that he built, or she built, let's think about who built it. Where does that come from? There are millions of people in the mines and the smelters and the warehouses and all the rest of it doing all the grunt work, the often dangerous, toxic grunt work. They're the ones that are doing it. They're the ones that's the platform for things that are so almost universally forgotten. Where does it come from? Like a friend of mine in Detroit, I practically always trot this one out. When he confronts people who want to keep all the technology and have even more and more and more of it, he always goes, "You want to go down in the mine?" And I go, "What? No." Well, how many here want to go down in the mine? Nobody, right? Not me. Okay. So where the hell does the technology come from? You've got to enslave millions of people to have your toys. Toys, in quotation marks, it's the stuff that's destroying the biosphere faster and faster. And another little thought, I'll just throw this out because it always tickles me when I think of it. From the cover of a booklet, I was in Brazil and there were some primitivists there. And I lost it. I'd love to always bring it and show it if I get to do a talk somewhere. But it showed these figures going up this, climbing up and getting to the top and then plummeting over the cliff. They just fall off the edge the other way. And the caption said, "We've come this far. We can't go back now." And when it was my turn, I just held it up and I said, "I got nothing to add. This is just, say no more." You know what I mean? Of course, I went on to yak and yak, but I thought that was just perfect. There it is. Yeah, let's just keep up with the suicide machine. Yeah, it's working out real well. And this is at the bottom of your webpage, and I really can't help but mention this, and I think you won't mind because you wrote it. We didn't evolve through billions of years to remain animals. I mean, you don't have a problem with that. I find that hard to believe, and I don't mean to be personally insulting with that, but you want to dispense with animality. We are animals. That's what we need to somehow retain or return to, a literal return to the earth. The animality is, right, I guess you feel it's better to become a machine. And I find that don't quite get that. And by the way, it's not billions of years ago. It's just this side of 4 million years ago that the first human species appeared. So it's not a matter of billions. But that's a statement that, if you stand behind, we're really on opposite sides of the thing. Okay, that's all I got.
All right, so please join me in thanking our speakers one more time before we can move this. So we are now going to start a question and answer session. Now, as this debate has undoubtedly attracted people of polar opposite opinions, I want to remind you that though I'm sure all of you have strong opinions that you would wish to express at great length, the question is a short interrogative sentence ending in a question mark. So please, I'll take applause for that. So please direct your questions to either one or both of the speakers, and recognize that everybody else's questions are also directed to one or both of the speakers. And speakers, if you would be so kind as to repeat the question, just so we make sure that you are on the same page as the person who's asking. After the Q&A at about 8:17, we are going to break and we will have a discussion. We have the room until 9 o'clock, at which point you will be able to discuss at great lengths with the speakers as well as your common audience members. So let's get into the Q&A. Please be reminded that a question is a short interrogative statement of a question.
Okay. I stated my position, which is a combo position. To the two of you, you did fly a plane down here. I'll bet you used some technology. So I'd like to, I found out the Amish do use technology, and I'll bet you do too. So I'd like to hear about that. For you,
is that your question?
To him. To you, Zoltan. Years on a sailboat, communing with nature, that must have had a deep effect on you. I'm guessing that's an experience that you'd like other human beings to share. And so moving our two speakers toward the middle.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Well, I guess the question is, how do you justify being involved with the technology that you hate? And it's a tough one. It's hypocritical. Or at least contradictory. I didn't ask for any of this stuff. As the New Model Army tune has it, we didn't ask for any of this. But here we are. And I know anarchist friends of mine I really respect who don't. I mean, they really are outside of it. I guess just my own personal decision. I'm trying to push the dialogue, the conversation in society. And if I were sitting in a cave, I wouldn't be even potentially contributing in that sense, anyway. But there's a tension there for sure.
He had asked how I had sailed so many years, and ultimately it was a very nature-oriented trip because I was with the ocean, and how can I kind of sort of justify that? Some of my more techno-optimist ideas that seem to run against some of the natural stuff I've done. Well, they don't actually run against necessarily. I think most transhumanists are also environmentalists to a certain extent. I think we look towards the environment. We know that there's overpopulation. We know that we are harming the earth. And no transhumanist that I know appreciates that or likes that. In fact, I know a lot of transhumanists are getting involved in green technology as a way to try to fix that, looking for technological fixes. And I entirely support that because I have spent so many years covering environmental stories, and I'm still absolutely in love with wildlife, and I still belong to a number of nonprofit wildlife organizations that I donate to and also contribute to. And I look forward to continuing to do that, but also using technology, specifically some of the radical technology to, build back the environment that we have destroyed. Unfortunately, we have had to do that in order to get as far as we have. But I'm a big fan of believing that we will start moving more to megacities and that nature will be protected over the long run through the types of advances in technology and science that you can hear about in the news every single day. I mean, green technology in the next 20 years is gonna be very, very important business in restoring, I think, what's happened to our habitat.
I had a question for John. You mentioned during sort of your second statement the term diseases of civilization, and and you mentioned that we should go look it up, so I looked it up, and I was just wondering, essentially the diseases that are listed under the umbrella diseases of civilization are diseases like Alzheimer's, cancer, type 2 diabetes, things that tend to have onset ages that are later in life, maybe 55 plus is the biggest age range for these diseases. So my question to you, I guess, is could you clarify your position on that? Are you saying that people shouldn't, we shouldn't work to extend our lives at all, and that we should, let people die earlier so that they don't get diseases like Alzheimer's?
No. Well, the question is about disease, and it's one's attitude about that and the origins of that kind of thing. Well, it isn't just. And I'm trying to encapsulate this. You mentioned several things there. One thing about Alzheimer's that's kind of troubling is the usual answer is, well, people are living a lot longer, so you're going to have more Alzheimer's. But you probably also saw there the incidence of Alzheimer's at earlier and early ages is what's troubling. You start seeing people in their 50s; they're not in their 70s or 80s, and they're getting Alzheimer's. So, and the question of autism is troubling. And why is that going up? I mean, to me, that's that's a long that's an involved deal, but it's certainly possible to see that as a consequence of massive alienation, where people they're resisting the dominant culture in a very basic way. Well, that's one way to look at it, anyway. But the thing about degenerative diseases, that's a function of agriculture. That's a function of you've got, for example, you get a lot of kids because you can show them what the weed looks like and they go out and pull the weed. Whereas in hunter-gatherer life, the emphasis is on acuity of senses and being able to pick up on the cues in nature that seem so, to us, absolutely too subtle for us to understand. But I mean, that's a much more basic thing than modern diseases. And the same with infectious diseases. What you have now, and we're reminded with the Ebola thing, you have infectious disease incubated when you have sedentism and a lot of people together in big numbers, whereas, hunter-gatherer life, band society, very decentralized, small groups, society was 60, 70 people. So you don't have enough to feed the plague and stuff like that. It rapidly disappears because it doesn't have the hosts. But you have that when you start having cities and stuff. So that's kind of a brief way to put it, but we're not just talking about modern diseases. And no, I certainly don't want people to live shorter lives. I mean, let's face it, I'm closer to the end of my life almost certainly than Zoltan is. And we could get into maybe we will get into this whole question about longevity and living forever kind of thing. I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet. But anyway, thanks for the question.
My question's for Mr. Zoltan.
Sorry, I was trying to record it, but go ahead.
I think you did a very good job at explaining a lot of the comforts that we benefited from as people and as humans, and quantifying very well like a lot of the health statistics, and those are indisputable. And then John kind of did something concurrently where he pointed out that the technology making that possible depends on levels of control and power that only came as a result of domestication to maintain the complex array and nexus of technology and power and control and all that stuff to make it possible. My question is, are any transhumanists, and maybe any of the transhumanists can answer, are any transhumanists trying to reconcile whether it's possible to maintain a technological future despite it apparently, I think obviously, depending on systems of control and power that
Sure, and I'll try to, without re-asking the question, I'll just try to answer it because it's a fascinating question. And I think the first thing to understand is that the transhumanist community is totally splintered. I've actually never come across a community that has so many different branches of ideas, of philosophers, of people trying to go the same direction under one umbrella. So there are people that would, I'm on one side, and most of the transhumanist community knows that I kind of represent that extreme pro-technology point of view, but there are lots of transhumanists that don't want to use technology if it invades in any way on people's personal freedoms. And that is one of the things you're speaking about, because when you talk about control, you're ultimately talking about who is controlling that, and why are they controlling it, and can they use that control over everyone else? And in general, that has been one of the dangers of technology. It's nuclear energy can be a boon, or it can be something very dangerous in the hands of anyone, around the world. So it's a catch-22, and we have to be very careful. I personally know of only a very few, I would say, extremist transhumanists that really want to push technology just so far as fast as they can. I certainly am not like that. I would say that most transhumanists are not 100% pro-technology. Some of them will subscribe to various ideas of Mr. Zerzan here, where they want to keep the human element as part of a transhuman being. And they don't like me even speaking about transhumanity. They want to speak only about humanity. But they want to use technology for living longer, for benefits, for perhaps removing certain types of diseases when we give birth to our children. In fact, I'd say the middle ground is that that most transhumanists are not willing to move too quickly. Artificial intelligence is one of the most complex questions of transhumanism, and I have found that more than 50% of transhumanists want to have some type of safeguards on developing that, because they are so afraid that we're going to develop a type of Terminator scenario. And I feel the exact same way. I think either some type of government body or some type of regulatory body must put a foot down and say, we can't just let anyone develop this technology, because we're going to have a species that's smarter than us and might be more of a warring species or might be more of an angry species. So ultimately, there are lots of transhumanists out there who call themselves transhumanists, but they have quite a few green colors, quite a few anarchist colors, quite a few very liberal colors, where they're willing to be a transhumanist as long as they don't cross any of the lines of democracy, any of the lines of individual freedoms. And I actually support and have a lot of friends like that, and myself am partially in that category, because I'm trying to retain the very best of what it means to be human, while also reaching forward and saying, well, what else can we become that also contributes to that?
If primitivism cannot be optional and still have the earth safe, because some groups will want to advance their technology while the others want to be egalitarian and use pre-domestication technologies, then how can you make the world homogeneous without post-domestication technology?
Well, it seems to me in a way, the shoe's on the other foot. In other words, you could say, want to have a computer? Go ahead. But that means you're going to have to get people into factories making all these rare metals and plastics and everything else. So it's more of a problem for those people in a certain way. You see what I mean? Because that stuff, again, depends on all of these extraction and all of these processes that have been so negative, and they don't come down from heaven. I mean, so I'm not saying it's impossible, though. I mean, there are people, and nobody has any idea. There are people that think that it's going to be just this big collapse, and then everything will be dandy. But you might still have people with a whole lot of power who could enforce that, who could make them do that stuff and make a worldwide grid for them to have. Who knows? I mean, it's just fraught with questions. I mean, if money isn't worth anything, how are they going to pay these people? Are they going to will they somehow coerce an army to do it? I mean, you can think of a million scenarios as to how it might work. The only I can think of, it's just it's a better, freer, healthier idea, and maybe it'll catch on. Maybe people will start to realize the whole question of technology is not neutral. That's a fundamental mantra that has to be exploded. It's not neutral. It's never been neutral. It's just fraught with values and choices, and it's time we show them, put them on the table. It just, all these things just keep advancing, including domestication. If it's just treated like a natural thing, well, it'll just keep going. Yeah, it'll just keep going until we say, is there a problem here? Shouldn't this be problematized or politicized, if you will? I mean, so it's all subject to what happens, what we're going to do about it. It's not an inevitability.
Question is from John directly. On Free Radical Radio, an interview a few weeks ago, like a month ago or something, with regards to the Spanish Civil War and like anarchists clinging to real past struggles and stuff. You said in so many words, like you don't need to focus on that, but like as younger folks trying to get in and still be like holistic and study, like what would you suggest to the contrary when trying to extract certain lessons from certain struggles that got like even maybe you to a certain place? How do we proceed when trying to get clarity about this whole situation?
No, that's a good one. That's
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, well, he's talking about if we think that these, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, that some of these struggles are irrelevant now, and so is that what we think, or how do we introduce people to the tradition of struggle of anarchists, for example? Is that what you meant? Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think I've handled that real well. I've gotten frustrated and just kind of said, "Who the hell cares about the Spanish Civil War? We got to." Here we are in 2014. Let's face it. But I could also tell you, I've been in Spain a few times, and I've had a few of the most moving experiences of my life, talking with people I think they're no longer with us, but who were there in Barcelona and elsewhere, fighting on the lines against the fascists, and it was just an incredible feeling of respect and a special opportunity. So I in that sense, I don't mean the hell with them, but I was trying to stress the other part of it, I guess, in a clumsy way, that we got our own stuff to talk about, and in fact, that's one of the things I got from some of these folks, like, we're done here. CNT and all that stuff is ancient history. It's up to you guys. We don't even agree with you, but go for it. Take it forward and see what you got.
So, my question is more for Mr. Zoltan. It seems that the problem for the transhumanists is that there's a serious reduction of our global problems to just we need more technology. It seems like we're going more individual analysis. We're forgetting about historical context, politics, social philosophies, so on. And it seems like the problem is that we're reducing technology to just, which is a very wide category to. It seems like we're losing distinctions in calling and just supporting technology or going against it. It seems like we're doing all or nothing. So, what would you think, I guess, the transhumanist response is to that?
Well, I think you're asking, I'll just give my answer and try to incorporate the question. One thing that has happened, at least in the transhumanist community, is transhumanism in the last 10 years, and I'll give you the roundabout answer, has gone from being science fiction to something that is now really happening in our lives. For example, in France, a few weeks ago, they put in the second robotic heart. They've been doing robotic hearts for a long time in human beings, but this is the first and second time that they have put in a heart that is not to be replaced with a transplant. It's a robotic heart, and I'm pretty certain that within 10 years they'll have robotic hearts that are as good as human hearts. In fact, there'll be robotic hearts that are as good as Olympian hearts. And the question is, with heart disease being the #1 killer in the world,
when will people start replacing electively this surgery to have this robotic heart put in? Let's just say it could be affordable, because right now it's not. But the idea is, 10 years ago, transhumanism was still science fiction. Today, the technology is making it so that we are looking and saying, wow, these things are happening. They now have a robotic arm on a couple of amputees, and it's tied into the nervous system. They can grab a glass of water and drink. 10 years ago, that was complete science fiction. The point is the transhumanism movement is reaching a very important point when all these things we have been talking about are actually coming true. And it's no longer just philosophy to discuss the ethics of it. It's actually real life. Is it good for society? Is it good for government? Is it good for, in a practical world, for the environment? Transhumanism is coming of age, and it's very scary. It's scary for even transhumanists, because I think a lot of people have been clapping their hands for this without realizing that one day it comes, and one day if you really are going to take off your arm and put on a better robotic arm, is that something you're willing to do? So should we continue full speed, I think was the question. I think we should continue as fast as we can, but making sure that we address all the ethical issues along the way so that people, especially in a democratic society, are happy with that. We live in a world that's quite religious, and I think increasingly those views, the religious view, is going to get challenged by this idea of, humankind living indefinitely or living far longer. Anyone that in this room that's under 25 might easily live to 150, 200 if they die at all, given the progress of technology. This brings up incredible challenges, incredible ethical quandaries, and so I think we should, as a transhumanist, I certainly advocate for more examination into the issues and perhaps putting brakes on certain issues, certain technological issues that might become more of an existential risk. I'm not going to say stop developing human hearts, but when it comes to things like, various biochemical things that could happen, artificial intelligence, nuclear risks, I certainly advocate putting brakes on it until we have a good grasp of the technology to make sure it's not going to harm us. Because the last thing we want to do is have what John's worried about happening, where we have pushed technology so fast that all of a sudden we all get wiped out and one super robot ends up the victor.
Yes. Though it is past 8:17, I'll take 2 more questions. You've had your hand up for a while. No, we just from back there is fine.
Other people got the mic.
No, no one else got the mic.
All right, so for cyborg guys, you've been talking a lot about how the system wants to share technology with us, how it's so great we're all going to have robot hearts. But it seems like most young people, the way we experience technology is in the streets of Ferguson, when the police are shooting at us in tanks, and the NSA surveilling us. I mean, you basically said that technology is going to solve the problems that we're faced with right now. The biggest problems we're up against is the wealth gap, is global warming. These are problems that are caused by industrial systems. How is a transhumanist position going to solve all this?
Sure, and I'll just say that your question is the number one question I always get asked, and perhaps the most important one, because generally, and I'm going to say right off, I'm not part of that super rich 1%, so this question applies to me, because I'm also with you in the streets, having technology put at me and my family that is out of my control, that I can't buy my way out of, or something like that. My best argument for that is, and it's not one that necessarily satisfies everyone, but it's sort of, I like to use the argument of cell phone technology. Well, through a lot of my travels, I have seen cell phones in the poorest villages in Africa, where there's no power, there's just one solar panel, and a bunch of villagers have cell phones, and they plug it in there, and they got it. But 20 years ago, nobody, not anyone in this room probably, could have afforded a cell phone. It was the technology that only belonged to the highest government members and to those on Wall Street. However, through the decades, it has trickled down, and it hasn't been exactly pretty, because there's a lot of upset people that are, I don't want to say poor people, but they're just not rich, like the majority of us, and they haven't had access. The problem is with the robotic hearts, they cost $200K, so who's going to get them first? The rich. I got to tell you, I'm not happy about that either. My goal, though, is to try to tell people that ask questions like you that we should, as a democracy, try to create a system that forces that when these technologies come out, we can apply it to everyone. Now, that in a political way, that may be impossible, but it's certainly an idealistic kind of version that I hope to aspire to, and that I hope to tell people that all transhumanist technology should be allowed to everyone. It shouldn't just be some, America getting it. It should be everyone around the world should get it. It may not happen that way in our capitalistic society. It may take 10, 20, 30 years to get to the very bottom of it. But hopefully, with a whole new generation of people leading Google and some of these other giant internet companies, they don't seem like the Rockefellers, the hardcore people. They seem a lot nicer. I think they're going to make it so that democracy and wealth actually does trickle down faster than it has been in the past. It's not as fast as you would want it, but it's fast enough.
We have time for one more question.
Yes. This question for you, Mr. Zerzan. Suppose a group of a few thousand anarcho-primitivists decided to go into wilderness and live the anarcho-primitivist lifestyle. What would their day-to-day lifestyles look like? Would they spend most of their time on persistence hunting? What would their views be on death, religion? Once I was in the western regions of China and I saw a Cossack family that made one of their babies in the organs of a dead sheep. So I was wondering if they would have any shamanistic rituals, and how they would deal with black modern medicine, and how would they contain diseases, how would they go about marriage, and whether they would keep any existing technological infrastructure like vaccines, computers, or any modern technologies.
I don't think that's the answer to drop out. I don't think it's a social answer. It might be a way to reskill ourselves, and certainly nothing wrong with that. We're going to need that, I think, but I don't think that's. There's no place this hasn't reached. It'd be an illusion. In fact, by the way, the African with the cell phone or holding up a can of Coca-Cola, that's a nightmare to me. That ain't wonderful. That's just, if domestication is ever more control and surveillance, well, there you have it. It's not a matter of access. It's like some Jamaican folks said, none shall escape. Don't have to worry about access. You'll be part of the machine soon enough, unless you smash that machine.
Let's have another hand for our speaker. So we're now going to break for discussion, but I just want to mention a few logistical things before we do that. If you've enjoyed the debate tonight, or enjoyed the topic of the debate tonight, you would love the other things that the Transhumanist Association does here. And the best way to stay informed about what we're doing in the Transhumanist Association is to be on our email list. And so during the discussion, we'll have a computer set up at that desk over there if you would like to leave your email with us, and then you can stay in the loop with what we're doing. And furthermore, both of the fine debaters have brought books of theirs that they will gladly sign for you and sell to you for a reasonable price that I'm not sure. So thank you guys all again for coming. Please come down and talk to our speakers, talk with one another. We have the building until 9. Thanks again. Keaton, would you man this for a second?